Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Journaling Through Life Home Edition. Today, we have an author, a cancer survivor, a real estate fantastic person. You can explain what exactly you do in real estate, Jay. It was just a short introduction. He has a university degree from the University of Texas. And Jay wrote a book, Cancer on the Brain, detailing his experience with a brain tumor and leukemia, all while being a husband, a father, coaching an inner city little league team, baseball team to victory. Now, Jay, you are back in Texas. How are
Yes.
things? How are you doing?
Doing well back here. And we were just talking a little bit before we jumped on that Texas is one of the initial, probably 8 to 10 states where we're starting to reopen, so to speak. And restaurants, all restaurants, all retail businesses are reopening on May 1st at a 25% capacity. And some businesses are still staying closed. Movie theaters, barber shops, hair salons are going to possibly reopen about mid-May. So different times, right, that we're all going through. Unprecedented for sure.
Absolutely unprecedented. And it just dawned on me that May 1st is Friday.
Yes.
Like, is this Friday?
This Friday, yes.
Right. That is insane. Well, I'm so happy that you guys are healthy, family doing well, everybody healthy in your community, in your
Yes, in my little inner circle, we're all well.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Now, Jay, I was talking about the little league team, the baseball. Is that something that you miss? Is that something that is close to your heart and that you sort of really miss in this time?
Oh, that's something I really, really miss. And I'm a big baseball fan. I'm a former baseball player, so I actually the first time I coached Little League was in my 20s, and I had one daughter, so everybody was like, "What? Why do you want to coach?" They're almost suspicious because you don't have a son. And I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then my second round was with my stepson when he was in his early teens, and I started coaching again, and that's how I got involved with this inner city team. And interestingly, I mean, we were like the bad news bears, if anyone remembers that movie or those movies. Um, so a lot of eventful things happened with that team, but they were all 13, 14, 15, 16 when I coached them. So really crucial times in their life, right, for these kids. And now they're in their 20s, and a lot of them Facebook friends. They text me, they Instagram me. So it's really cool. Still kind of involved with several of them in their lives.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And you're absolutely right. It's a very formative years. It is the formative years. And if they can have a really good team experience, because not everybody has that. And I think that is what is lacking now too. Well, everybody's at home. A lot of kids need school. They needed that team to feel okay mentally, to be a part of something bigger, to have that stability, even a mentor like you were to them. So I'm so happy that they're all still keeping in touch. It's like you
Yes.
say, it's one of those movies that
Yes, right.
speaking of movies, you were in the movie industry too, correct? Um,
I am a big movie buff, and so somehow I got into investing in movies. And the first one was a movie called Another Happy Day. It was Demi Moore and Kate Bosworth and George Kennedy, Thomas Hayden Church. So big stars, right? Should have been a big hit. And we actually got to go to the Sundance Film Festival. They got us in. We were there with Demi Moore and all the stars, and Ellen Barkin was in it. We were there for the premiere. It did well at the film festival and just never really took off. Um, but it was fun. We had a lot of fun, and then after that, we've invested in a couple of animated films. So that's the extent of me being in the movie industry. And you and I have had some good conversations because you write screenplays.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it always looks good on the resume, right? And
Right,
it's a life
right,
experience.
right.
You absolutely have that in your back pocket.
Yes, can't put a dollar amount on it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And now your book, are you still doing some virtual book tours, some workshops, I guess you can't really sign virtually, but
Yeah, I have. It was published in 2012, and it's just essentially called Cancer on the Brain. It's about my life, and it's through. I mean, the subtitle is Baseball Business and Beating the Odds, and with all those things we talked about, running a business and beating the odds of once having a brain tumor, and then 2 years later, completely unrelated, having cancer in the form of lymphoma. So multiple, I mean, I had 3 cranial surgeries with the brain tumor, and I have a metal plate in my head, and my right leg is numb. And then the cancer came along, and it's the doctor visits and the radiation, the chemotherapy, and all of that. Uh, so it was all kind of intertwined at the same time. And my motto has always been, like Hank Aaron used to say, again, I'm dating myself. But as a baseball fan, keep swinging. That was his motto,
right.
is whether I'm in a slump or not, keep swinging. So I kind of lived that, just keep swinging and doing what I was doing. And so those 3 things, the medical conditions, the baseball, and my business is all intertwined, and the baseball players were all a part of it, became part of our family. Um, so I did a couple of book signings in New York. I did a couple in Austin, Texas, and some in Phoenix. And then as the years have gone on, I'll have some cancer groups that'll ask me to come give a speaking engagement and sign books and sell books thereafter. And I've done a few book fairs here and there, but honestly, now what I do more than anything, which is more fun than all of that, and I make $0 from it, is just anytime anyone knows someone who is diagnosed with cancer, I just say, tell me all about them, and I send them a book. And then I get to know those people, and they'll talk, and they'll read my book, and you hope they can take one thing out of the book. And that's all I hope for. One thing that maybe can help them, even if it's like laughing at me and my experiences, help them get through whatever it is they're going through with their diagnosis or their cancer condition.
Absolutely. And we were saying, not everything that you do in life is for the almighty dollar. Like, there is that
Yes.
sense of community. And that's why we're doing this as well. This series on YouTube is to reach people. And as much as, we can sit in our homes, we can still contribute in whichever way that we can. And you made an interesting point to keep swinging, and just to pun it back to the movies. I wonder if Finding Dory had that. Just keep swimming, just keep swinging.
Ah,
Just saying, just
there you go.
saying.
Yes, could be.
No copyright infringements. Don't go
Yes.
there. But that's really incredible. And I think empowering people, if you have been through traumatic life experiences like cancer, that gives you a different sense of community and how you now can support people. And that is why I ask you to be on this episode as well, just to share some of your experiences, because all of us now sitting in this pandemic, being in our homes, we are faced with a lot of trauma, stress, anxiety, all of those things. And it's really hard to manage. And I think it is not dissimilar in its nature that when you get a cancer diagnosis, it's immediate. Your life was before, and then your life is after. So we had our normal before, now we're in a pandemic. Like, we don't know what the future is going to be. Like you said, you guys are opening some things in May 1st. Canada has not even put a timeline on it. They put a plan
Mm.
together, but it's not when is this going to happen. And I think that creates a lot of uncertainty. Or if you can just sum up sort of, the anxiety or that first initial when you were diagnosed with cancer, and how you can relate it to us being in this situation, what really helped?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, because you're right. It is almost a perfect analogy comparing those two. And I always, and I talked about it a little bit in my book, and again, I'm a movie buff, so I would relate to the movies, and you watch all these movies, and how many movies have been done about people who are diagnosed with, whether it's cancer or any life-threatening medical condition. And in the movies, it's very dramatic. and there's a big scene and they're told and the family's around, or these people get in their car and they drive for an hour and they contemplate, what is the new normal going to be, or what is life going to be after this. Well, I didn't have any of that. Both times for me, I get a phone call from the neurosurgeon or the oncologist, and you have a brain tumor, or you have lymphoma, you have cancer. I mean, it was truly that's how it went. So I thought, where's my movie scene? Where's my dramatic scene where everybody's around? What do I do? Do I drive for an hour and think about it? So and then both times I asked myself those questions: is what does my life mean to me? What do I want to do going forward? Do I make a bucket list? Do I change my life? And both times I came to the same conclusion, was that I'm doing exactly what I'm doing, whether it was my family, my daughter, my stepkids, my business, coaching baseball. I'm already doing what I'm doing. So for me, that was my therapy, is I just kept doing what I was doing, and I checked with the array of medical doctors. And it's a 50-50 relationship, right? And that there's 50% of it we can't control. And I always looked at it as there are powers greater than me that are going to determine whether I survive a brain tumor or cancer. So I let go of that, and I focused on what I could control. My 50%. I can select my doctors. I can choose my mental perspective on a day-to-day basis and the things that I do. So I kind of take that same analogy with this COVID scenario. I mean, none of us have any control over this whatsoever. One, what it does to our lives and what we can do. So I try to focus what I can control and on a day-to-day basis. And that way I don't really think about, am I going to get the disease, or what's going to happen if I do get it. I mean, cancer survivors are high risk if they do, especially for someone like me who has pulmonary issues after post-cancer. So, but I try and focus what I can. I mean, even something as simple as setting up my little cockpit and fort, at home. It's like, why not focus on that? And we can choose how much we go out into the public. We can choose whether we wear masks and our social distancing. But I really don't think about what would happen if I do get the disease. Just as with cancer, I never really thought about, am I going to die from this tumor or lymphoma?
Absolutely. And you made such a valid point about the control. And I think what we've learned in this whole experience too is the limited amount of control that we do actually have. Like maybe before this, we thought we have control over almost everything or every aspect of our lives. So it's also sort of a wake-up call to say, did we really even have control in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe the answer is no, as much as we thought we did.
Right?
Uh, yeah, we found out how much control we really had over our lives, right? That's a good point.
Exactly. And I love how you said, you're not really doing anything completely different. And I think that is sometimes what people struggle with too, is now you're in your home and you have all these outside influences saying you have to be able to run a marathon after you're done this, or be the healthiest eating person in the world. And they are putting up all these expectations, but just coming back to yourself and saying, this is what is good for me. This is what's therapeutic. This is what works for me. I think if people just stand still for the moment, take that suspended time and say, you know what, maybe I should journal about this. Maybe I should do a little movie, or find things that are comforting, but also keep you from spiraling into that overthinking situation. Was there specific things that you did, like I said, the self-care or things like that, that helped you mentally get to that balance?
In the diagnosis situation,
Yeah, in the
or
diagnosis.
sort of both?
Or both.
Yeah, and that's, we talked about how the isolation, cancer patients are diagnosed and they feel isolated from that. Well, here we are now, we're experiencing physical isolation in our homes. And that, I think people feel very uncomfortable with that and very, very insecure as to how to deal with that. And again, when I was through all my diagnosis, I would try and keep swinging, doing what I was doing, and that helped me. Well, we're now in a situation where we necessarily can't do what we're always doing, but we can get creative and do the things we're comfortable with. And we even even if people that like to travel, I've told them, well, why don't you, we now have the benefit of technology. It's like, well, go online, travel online, or plan your next trip, do something like that. Or one of our family traditions is we do a jigsaw puzzle every holiday. But every holiday we all put one out. So we like, well, let's make this a holiday. And what are some of our holiday traditions that we would do when you do have time off and you are kind of sheltering with family in the home by choice? So we've tried to incorporate some of those aspects. And again, I guess really what it's doing is trying to get the control back, right? Trying to find things that, well, we can control doing this in our house. This is something we normally would do. It makes us feel better, like, well, maybe I am in control of my life, even though we're not.
Absolutely. And the tradition thing, that just made me think too that, even, and we're just going to relate cancer, to the back and forth. Like if you were diagnosed with cancer and you're too sick to go to your graduation, you're too sick to go to weddings, you're too sick to join in all these milestones. People are having that now too, where they can't go to prom. They can't go where they used to go. The traditions have to adjust according to what situation we are in now. So again, it's something that you just cannot control, right? So
Right.
how would you say that people can be okay with it in that situation where, you want to so badly? How do you sort of come to grips with that you just really can't?
I think it kind of goes back to what the focus is. And as hard as it is, right, letting go of what we can't control. And once we let go, really we're talking about small things. If we and focusing on what we can control, as small as that may be, I think helps us have a way of dealing with what we can control.
Right. So maybe just putting things in perspective.
Yeah.
Would it
Yeah.
be
Right.
fair to say that the concept of that things are temporary is also very important, that you're not going to get stuck in this? Because I'm sure the same with any trauma that you have. You have ups and downs, but to know that you're not going to be stuck in this down position, or we're not going to be stuck in our homes forever, to have maybe a future plan. Like, what did you do when you got the diagnosis? Because it doesn't sound like it was an easy path in any way, shape, or form. Did you ever think future planning was part of that process for you?
Yeah, it was. But again, I was sort of focusing on what I needed to do on a day-to-day basis. I was just one of the people. And again, it's not right for everybody. And really, especially with the diagnosis or any life-threatening medical condition, they have to find their way, right? What works for them. Nobody can say this is how you deal with it, but they can find their way. My way was keep swinging, go about my business. I kept coaching, I kept going to work as much as I could. And fortunately, I had doctors and physicians that told my wife, just let him go. His body will tell. If he's pushing it too much, his body will tell, without being ridiculously,
Of course.
unreasonable. But this is a very weird analogy, but there's a show called Naked and Afraid. Have you ever seen that?
It sounds familiar. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so
look it
there's
up.
a show called Naked and Afraid, and two people go out and they meet and they strip down and they go into the jungle and they're put together. It's survival skills, and they're there for like sometimes 14 to 21 days, and they have to live off the land, make a fire, build a shelter, and all this. And the only reason I bring that up is because yeah, it's a crazy show. So look at it sometime on cable. But the only reason I thought of that is because you mentioned the temporary aspect, and I watched that show, And sometimes 7 days into the 14-day, people will have a mental breakdown and they can't do it. And they tap out, the producers come in and they pull them out of the challenge. And as viewers, we're thinking, well, it's temporary. So how can you not get your mind wrapped around the fact that this will come to an end? So that kind of made me think about what you're saying, is that I think for some people, they don't know if it's temporary. So it's hard to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. If they were told when the end was going to be, they could probably every day, right? You mark off on the wall, this day's over, I've got 5 more to go. But I think some people are really consumed in it, not knowing if we will ever go back to normalcy, and maybe that's okay. I mean, because one of the chapters in my book was called The New Normal. It's like, you don't go back to what it was, and that's okay. Maybe in this situation, what we're going through, it's unprecedented. But maybe if we start believing that it won't be normal, but the new normal will be okay, we will find that somewhere down the road, and maybe it'll be better. I don't know.
Yeah, and it actually reminded me of the Kubler-Ross too, the theory with loss, right? It's like,
Yes.
you'll never be the same, but nor do you want to be.
Yes.
So that makes a very good point. And you're right, though, with that temporary thing. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, am I in a movie? Like, did I miss making school lunches? And this was just all some really bad prank of the universe or something, right?
Yes.
And I think maybe people can take that and say, if you look at your life like a movie, and think that you're on this reality show, not in a really, psychologically messed up way, but just to get some distance, to say, what if for today, I just try and make my own story and say, this is what I did today, and this is how I survived the bathtub, and, make it a little bit lighter as well. And maybe that could help people like gain distance, because I think if you internalize everything all the time, it gets very, very heavy. And that's when you can't really, get back up.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, kind of one day at a time, right? Yeah, I like that.
Absolutely, one day at a time. And now you mentioned in the beginning that, the death factor and your own mortality, dear Lord, sorry, not morality, mortality wasn't really a thing that you dealt with. It wasn't that intense for you. However, I do think that some people now are faced with that. They're coming face to face with the idea that they could potentially not make it. What would your advice be, having gone through, or even the stories that you've heard of other people?
Mm-hmm. We broke up a little bit real quick.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
For ourselves, or?
Yes. So if we were to, again, equate it, just if you get a cancer diagnosis and, you're faced with your own mortality, I think a lot of people are feeling that. They're very scared that they're going to die.
Yeah.
So just from your experience with speaking to people, how you said, you're collecting stories of people and sending them books. How have other people dealt with it? How have you dealt with it?
Yeah, and that's when I have spoke to other cancer groups. I mean, one group I spoke to was the caretakers, which was really kind of interesting. They invited me to talk to all the caretakers, and at some point, my wife and my daughter were there, and at some point, they all started asking questions of my wife and my daughter, and I'm like, hello, what about me? They were all asking, well, how did you deal with that? My daughter, how did you deal with it? My wife, and so, but I've said to, in the talks that I've always had, is that I definitely may not be the best example going forward, because mine was, and I've said this before, is a lot of time people, as a survivor, people will say, well, oh my gosh, you must be so grateful to be alive, and you must look at life differently, and you must see things differently. And I always answered the way I thought they wanted me to answer, which was yes. Oh yes, I'm so grateful to be alive. And then I started feeling guilty, because I'm like, I don't feel any of that. I don't really wake up and stop and smell the roses. I don't do anything differently. And then I felt really guilty. But then I thought, well, maybe maybe it's because maybe I always had appreciation for those things. So it wasn't like all of a sudden everything just changed for me. So I'm not the best example, because I know other people do go through those scenarios, and maybe they do actually look at life differently. So, I mean, I think I've focused on telling them, and whether they're reading my book or whether we're just having conversations, and it's like, well, find your way. What is your way? What is it you can do every day to deal with this better, or to push aside the mortality? And again, and I told them, well, would you do anything differently if someone told you? Because as we know, physicians they'll never tell you you're going to die. They're never going to tell you you'll survive. You want them to say that, but I'll tell them, if someone told you were going to be okay, would you look at this differently? Well, of course, then that changes everything. So like with this scenario, I said, well, all we can control is minimizing the risk or the chances of us getting this virus. Beyond that, if we assume we're not going to get it and we do everything to minimize it, then, let's just keep functioning and doing what we do.
I love that. And I love the letting go idea. That's really, really powerful. Just, and the support. And I think that is something that is sometimes overlooked too. You mentioned your wife, your daughter, right? The
Mm-hmm.
caregivers. That is a fantastic point that we can move towards, to say, who do you have supporting you in this? And I think the strength that you are showing in this as well in itself is an example of how people are dealing with this differently. And they can look to people like you and say, you know what, look at what this guy survived, and he's still grateful and he's happy and he's here. It also switches the mindset if you see other people that have had it, in their own perception as a
Right.
really traumatic experience, to say, man, it could be worse. It could be,
Right.
to
Well,
maybe
yeah,
that.
that's exactly right. It could be worse. And oftentimes people will see me and they'll say, oh, well, you're back to normal. And I'll kind of I'm like, no, I'm not back to normal. I have a metal plate in my head. I have a numb right leg from the brain tumor. I have a paralyzed right diaphragm. I have 70% breathing capacity. I have a restricted esophagus from the scarring. But I kind of tell them, because really what I'm saying is that's okay. It's okay. I'm not the same, but that is okay. It could be far, far worse. So it's like, I guess what I'll also tell to them is you may not come out of this the same. So that should not be your focus, is that you have to completely be healed from this, or any of this, from this COVID scenario. We may never look at life the same. We may not function the same as a community, or as a nation whatsoever, but maybe that's okay. Things can be different and still be okay. They don't have to be the way they were. But it's hard for people to let go of that, right? Because that's what we know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And can you speak a little bit about the support that you did receive from the people close to you? Or your family with you now? Is everybody sort of in the same house? Like, how did that affect, and how can people rely on each other in this time without getting, I read something about Zoom fatigue, that people are now so tired of being on Zoom phone calls all the time.
Yes.
So how do you balance that support versus the over support versus,
Yes.
just healthy balanced support?
Yeah. And I had, my best support is my family was supportive of what I wanted to do. So they allowed me to keep swinging, as opposed to, they didn't hold me down without doing ridiculous things. They didn't hold me down. They let me move forward. They let me do what I wanted to do. And then I also, at the time our kids they were teenagers, and they're now adults in their 20s. And mine was like, you don't do anything differently. If you want to do something, and if I can be there, I'm going to be there, but don't not do it if for some reason, I can't be there or won't be there. So again, that was the best support I could get, is a family that allowed me to be myself and didn't really try and hold me back. Now in these times, I just think, especially I cannot imagine, people who are going through, anything that used to be normal, pregnancies or a cancer diagnosis, or I can't imagine doing it in this environment. So I just tell people, at least we have the benefit of technology, and we can reach out to them. We can talk to them on the phone. Yes, we can, the Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, all those video techniques, but even a virtual greeting card, reaching out to them. I think those little daily things to anyone that's going through something difficult can mean so much, because it's just a minute or a moment of normalcy, hearing someone's voice or seeing somebody's face, or getting a card just saying, hey, we're just thinking about you. I think that can be very, very helpful.
Very helpful. And I love what you said about giving people their own sort of dignity back, to say that you are in the situation, you really do know best what is good for you. We'll help you, we'll guide you, we'll support you, but we're not going to rescue you or sort of be over excessive in your business. Because I think what happens too, and this could happen now, and it probably happens in the cancer communities as well, is when people start by being so active, but then you're, as a supporter, are going to get burnt out at some point too. And then maybe the cancer patient would start feeling better. And then there's that disconnect, and that sort of it's not really in balance. So I think communication is also important, to say, how can I support you, versus just when and when and when and when.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Very, very much so. And that whole role is with the Cancer Biz company that I have, which is the international directory that you're a part of vendors, cancers, and it initially started out cancer survivors or patients that own or operate a business, sell a product, or provide a service. So I started up this directory, and essentially to, like myself as a survivor, I want to do business with other survivors. I'm going to spend my money, I want to put money in their pocket, support their businesses, their products. Many of them still continuing to run these businesses through diagnosis, through radiation, through treatment, and all that. But back to your point, when I started it up, about 6 months into it, I was being contacted by caretakers and caregivers, and saying, can we be a part? My mom is, and as we know, it can be almost more difficult for the caregiver. They are probably giving up more of their life to care for this person. So we expanded the directory, and we're now including caregivers that also have their own businesses, but they may have a child that they're taking care of, or they may have a parent, or some form of a relative, and it completely turns their life upside down as well.
Absolutely. And I think if you can build out that community and support system, then it's not one person needing to do 100%. If we can get 10 people doing, 10%, then you still get the 100%
right.
of support, right?
Right.
And I do think, just from a very philosophical way, that this COVID is doing that to us now as well. It's allowing us and sort of forcing us to look to our local vendors. It's looking to the communities. It's looking to sort of bring it back to us as humans, how we can support and help each other, right?
Yes.
I think that is a very important part of it. And as a final question, Jay, just to bring it back to your book, was writing sort of the first thing that you thought about to do to get your message out there, to share your story with the world?
No, I didn't. It was actually because in going through all this, which is part of the story of the book, I opened my big mouth to all my baseball players, these 15, 16, 17-year-old baseball players, because we had gone all the way to the state tournament, one of few teams that kept advancing, and so on the way back on the bus trip, I opened my mouth. Oh, this would make a great movie or a great book. I'm going to write about the book. Well, man, they did not let me forget that. And for 1 to 2 years afterwards, my players were, Coach, how's the book coming? I told my family, I got to write a book, because they're all expecting me to write a book. But what I love about your business and what you've created, your unique business that you have, is the writing and putting it down on paper, recording things. Because that's when I wrote my book, when I was going through these treatments. I mean, I was writing when I was sitting there getting chemotherapy. I was writing when I went through the radiation and times and all, and I wrote that. So it wasn't a first thought, but like what your company does, journaling and putting things on paper and logging. I mean, right? It takes it from here and it memorializes it, and that's what I was doing. I never really knew if I was going to get it published or if I ever finished the book, but I kept writing, and it was without a doubt therapeutic. So by default, by mistake, it became very therapeutic for me, and just reliving, all these experiences.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you.
Yes.
And I think how we were saying that your journey isn't necessarily the next person's journey. And, that is why we created these books. It just allows you to write down from a prompt, and then it's your story, and then you can reflect on it. Do you ever
Yes.
go back to the book and read certain things just as a memoir for yourself to reflect on your journey?
I do. It's not very often, but I do go back, and sometimes I'm struggling to find, where did I say that? And then I'll reread it. In fact, that was like that quote from Hank Aaron. I'm like, I remember I quoted Hank Aaron about, keep swinging. So I'm like, where was that? And how did I fit that in my book? So yeah, I do pull it out as a reference every once in a while. And my wife, there was one year my wife said, I'm sitting down and rereading your book. So she just sat down and decided she was going to reread the whole thing. And hopefully one day my grandkids will do the same.
Yes. I see their pictures on Instagram. They're so cute.
Yes.
And I do think that is something that is going to be helpful for people now when you're in COVID and you're writing your story. I've said this, I think, in all of my videos now too, is write it down, because we're never going to have this moment in history again, right?
Yes.
Like, write it down. Imagine reading it 10, 15, 20 years from now. My kids are still kind of little, so I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna read this 10 years ago, and you're gonna remember when you couldn't go to school, and you're gonna remember how strong you were, so that when you have challenges down the road, you can say, you know what, I survived this, and this is how I did it. And I
Yeah.
think that is so powerful and inspirational. And just learning from other people like yourself, the incredible journey that you had, and you survived and you thrived, and now you can be an inspiration to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's very positive parenting on your part, right? You're looking at what positive, what positive things can we get out of it? And
Right.
to some extent, you're making memories with them, right? That down the road, you will be able to look back on and talk about and hopefully laugh about some of them.
Yes, I think we'll laugh about most of it later.
Right.
And I do think when sports come back, we're all just going to be so happy.
Yes, I do too.
It's a thing. My son really, really misses ice hockey. That's his sport.
Oh,
He does
oh
like
yeah.
baseball too for the summer, but
Yes.
definitely does. Now, on a final note, Jay, is there anything that we can help in terms of the cancer community? How can we support them? I know you said everybody is on the website.
Mhm.
Is there anything else we can do that we can help?
No, I think it's cancerbiz.com, and it is an international directory. You can testify to that. We have all over the UK and Canada and Australia vendors from all over, and they are all survivors, patients, or caregivers that have their own business, product, service, and it's very diverse, the number of products and services. So if there are any business owners out there that qualify, they can certainly sign up. It's a pretty nominal annual membership to get on the list. And then other people, I encourage them, go to the site and give your money to these hardworking people who are just really juggling a lot of things, like you, business, family, all sorts of medical conditions all at the same time. And that's just, I've met, such as yourself, very amazing people. That's been the most fun in doing so.
Oh, thank you so much. And I will put all of the links down below. And I think definitely supporting local businesses, the small business, that's really economically the way that we're going to get out of this better.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Jay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your inspiration, for your insights. And we will chat to you again real soon.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. Thanks for inviting me.
To start your own journal as you navigate cancer, or if you are a friend or a family member supporting somebody with cancer, our digital journals are now available at journalingthrough.life. Keep journaling and keep growing.